good, y'all? Welcome everybody to the Backstop. I'm Paulie Jackson.
And I'm Bruce Maxwell.
And today's guest this week, we got on John Hamasaki. We appreciate you for coming on, John. Let me tell you guys a little bit about John. He brought us something. He came on today to join the conversation with us. John here is a criminal defense attorney in the state of California, based in San Francisco, so the Bay Area. A lot of culture there, and we're super thankful for him to come on and just join us in conversation amongst many different topics to promote some perspectives of different people in society, as well as in the carceral system, the criminal system, as well as the judge and court system as well. So, John, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And man, let's kick it off, fellas.
Sounds good. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for your time as well. And I can kick it off with you, John. You worked on probably a vast amount of different cases, but seems like some of your focus or what has landed upon you in time has been, or some more high profile cases have been some cases that have involved some hip hop artists and have been quite interesting in your experience in that. We'd love to hear about some of that. We'd love to hear about your overall experience as I'm sure you did public defender work as well. You actually have your own firm in Hamasaki Law. So yeah, we'd love to just kick it off, hear a little bit more about you. And yeah, we'll kind of just go from there.
Okay, I'll jump right in. I'm primarily a criminal defense attorney. Some of the other work that I do that may have some overlap is I'm also a police commissioner in San Francisco. That is civilian oversight. I am not a member of the police. I'm a member of the community that's been appointed to oversee them. So what that means is setting policies for the police, reviewing police actions, oversight, when it comes to it, discipline of officers that are involved in misconduct. But my regular day job, as you said, is a criminal defense attorney. It's what I've been doing my entire career. I went to law school wanting to be a criminal defense attorney. I think I grew up in Miami, Florida, and had a lot of experiences growing up. And saw a few of my friends go through the system, and it seemed like something where I could make a contribution, where I could help the community and represent people going through, what is generally one of the most difficult points in a person's life is, when they end up in the criminal justice system. So, I've been doing that for my entire career as a lawyer, and I've ended up in the radar, I guess, with some high profile cases. The big one recently was the Draco the Ruler case down in Los Angeles, where I spent a few years fighting that case.
Can you, without getting into specifics, can you explain to us some of the things that were, I'm not going to say shocking to you with that case, but some of maybe the labels, some of the association that was unwarranted towards your client, that just from a police standpoint, from a court standpoint, that might have been just assumed because of their profession, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, what made that case, I think, especially unusual was that it was a case out of Los Angeles, and it was, a young guy, Daryl Caldwell, better known as Draco the Ruler, who was achieving at that point in his career he was, very much on the upward track, right? He was starting to become big, and he ended up in the middle of this investigation. And there was a murder that took place, but he, didn't have anything to do with it personally. But, I think his profile attracted the police to him. And then from there, what I think was, really attracted the public's attention in a way was the labeling of him as a gang member because of his rap group. Right. And so he had a rap group, a crew that were other rappers and friends and, the entourage, and the police and the prosecutors decided that they would charge them as a gang. And so, as you may know, or have heard, adding a gang charge to any criminal case, pretty much anywhere in the country, makes the case really difficult, because what it allows the prosecutors to do is bring in a whole host of unrelated evidence, right? So they want to say, oh, you're a gang. And so now it's just not a trial about the crime, but it's a trial about all these things that other people did that you had nothing to do with, because they say, oh, well, X, Y, and Z are your fellow gang members. In this case, it was a rap group, right? And so they were saying, okay, well, the rapper over here, this guy did a burglary back, 5 years ago when you didn't even know him. And that's a gang crime. It was really unusual. It was really, for me as an attorney, pretty shocking the lengths that they went to label them a gang. And then, from there, I think, they needed a way to bring him into this case. And that's one of the dangers of our criminal justice system, not only being young and Black, but also achieving some celebrity. It ends up putting a bullseye on your back. And that's really what happened in this case.
I find it really interesting, John, the comparison of, that bringing in the gang-related charge into a case, and then opposing to bringing in a hate crime into cases, right? And the difficulty to get a hate charge charged on a crime, which it's been obvious in many cases amongst law enforcement, as well as civilian on civilians, as far as hate crimes, and then how easy it is for them to collect evidence on that gang-related charge and bring unnecessary aspects to it. What do you think? One, why is it? Is that something that's native to California, as far as the gathering of, I think it's 2 or 3, maybe like 3 or more people coming together as a group? To be able to be formed as a gang, whether it's business related, or is that something that's national? And then explain to me a little bit about like the ratio, the difference of, charging that hate crime as well as the gang adding the gang portion to it, because I feel like that in itself has its own separate connotation of like being unfair, right? As far as the system. So I'm just kind of curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, so California's gang laws, they're not that dissimilar. Most states have some version of it, and this, I think, came around. Most of the states enacted them around the 80s and the 90s, when back when gangs were a lot in the media. There was like Boys in the Hood and Menace to Society. And so it created this, atmosphere where people were, Hillary Clinton was calling young Black men super predators. And, it was a really different time, I think. But from that time in history, there's really been a path of destruction across the country, towards young, primarily Black and Latinx communities. And, the gang charges have been used in ways that I think they weren't intended. But also, the intent behind them back then, I don't think it's hard to look back and look at the history and understand that, it was a form of racism. There was, the intentions, it wasn't, people weren't out saying it, but like, if you look at some of the old footage from the news, everything was very much, portraying young Black and brown men as scary, as dangerous, as, gangs, guns, drugs.
Clear as day.
Yeah. And so, California has really, though, been, I guess we could say a leader in, not in a good way, but a leader in bringing gang charges and tacking on enhancements to charges. So, you can take a normal, felony charge and then you put a gang enhancement on there, and it can be 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, depending, with some violent crimes. So, there's been a movement away from that, right? We've had the district attorney in Los Angeles now, George Gascon, who won on opposing a lot of the sentencing enhancements. Also, the district attorney in San Francisco, Chesa Boudin, did the same thing. And, we're really not seeing any impact of public safety, but what we are seeing, you're still getting charged with the crime, right? And our criminal justice system, as messed up as it is still functioning according to how they generally designed it. It's just a little bit less racist.
Yeah.
Top to bottom, it's still a pretty racist system, but removing gang charges and the gang sentencing enhancements, I think, has been an important step forward.
No, I mean that's huge, because like what you're explaining is, and the question Paulie presented to you, it's like it so-called happens to more people of color, even back then, with the unrelevant evidence. Somehow, some way, it just appeared. What I'm saying, like to different demographics, and that's like I said, this is why we do this, because so many people don't want to see it for what it is, but at the same time, it's literally right in your face. And Paulie brought up a good point when we're talking about even the mass shootings that have happened in the last decade. Most of them, when it comes to Rittenhouse and all these guys, most of these guys are white people, but the media and the judicial system, they go out of their way to find every good part about these people and label them as having a bad day, having a bad childhood, wasn't very well in school, whatever have you, to rectify that they just went out and committed a felony. And it's amazing. It's really amazing, because like I said, it's literally right in front of your face. And it's like, as a normal person, unless it really is in your community or happening to you, or you work in it, it's like you'd be like, what, maybe he was having a bad day. But at the end of the day, like you're saying, even back in time, it was so easy for them to find those things to add on to those felony charges, or to add on to those actual charges to make it even more severe. And it just happens to happen to people of color.
Well, Bruce, the crazy thing about that is then you go to people like Trayvon Martin, right? And you have them dissect him. He's the victim in the case, right? And then you have them dissect him. Now, put this into perspective. Rittenhouse or whoever, the case may be, or somebody that, went and did a mass shooting, they dissect on how they might have been having a bad day. Then Trayvon is dissecting his mental health, is dissecting why he was in the place he was supposed to be when he was the one who got shot, right? He was the one that was murdered. So it's clear as day for people who want to see it, right? And I pride myself on perspectives and looking at every single spectrum of it. But when they're just literally dishing it out to us and showing us on a silver platter, like, we care about this person and the media is going to shift it this way and this person. No, we care about defending this person, on the other side that actually did the murder. It's so disheartening in the unity of our nation. And, it takes a lot of strength of us, of people, to continue to come together, even when, the system is pitting us against each other. It goes far. Vaxxers and anti-vaxxers. I mean, we can go on.
I don't know if you saw it. It was just a few days ago or last week where this white, far right QAnon type guy killed his two kids over some crazy, I think, beliefs. I'm sure it was probably had some mental health issues, but then they, the photos they show are him at, being happy at a beach, and and the photos and the backgrounds that are used on the young Black men who end up in our system, it's a very different narrative that's given, right? But what I would say though, is when that happens, we should call it out and say, look how you're giving, here's this whole history, and this person's led a life and they've had, mental health problems, substance abuse problems, and they're more sympathetic to the white perpetrators of violent crime. We should criticize that and point to the fact, not that, they're not only that they're justifying it, but that they don't do the opposite to everybody else, right?
Exactly.
That when somebody, a young Black man who's grown up in a very difficult community, who's been subject to violence since a very young age, who's had poor schools, who's had, whatever other types of trauma in their life, none of that is ever in the stories, right? And so what we need to ask the media to do, in my view, is do better by everybody, and to say, look, everybody deserves a fair evaluation in the media, right? Don't just say, it is kind of crazy sometimes what you see when you're like, wow, it seems like, I think Bruce said before, it was the sheriff came out after that young man shot up all the Asian women at the massage parlors, and the sheriff's like, well, he was having a bad day. I don't know what other mass murder. I mean, mass murders get such a kind justification by the police, but my role in the criminal justice system as a defense attorney is working with individuals and working with people. And what I've learned over that is, I've represented everybody from every community, and everybody's got a story and everybody's got a background, and nobody's there really aren't monsters in life. There are people who do some horrible things, but it's generally, if you look back at people's background and trauma, PTSD, things people have been through, a lot of it, it's not, does not, not hurting another person is ever excusable. But when you understand how some people have been treated since their childhood, by, neglected by society, neglected by the system, and then when they show up in court or end up getting arrested, you're like, well, little Jimmy from over here in the suburbs and, with affluent parents and going to the private schools, having a good life, which great, good for them. But you can't judge them the same as the kid who grew up poor, subject to violence, right? And so we need to look at people as people and kind of stop this way of criminalizing certain communities.
Yeah, I mean, and on our previous discussion, man, we were talking about the viewpoint of equality of where people live at. We discussed a little bit about how, they take the poor and they label Black and brown communities more times than not as dangerous areas or, underprivileged areas, whatever. But there's also no movement in the system to help those areas. There's no movement in the system to improve those areas. And so it's like the judgment. So if those kids, like you just said, if those kids turn out to do wrong, it's like, oh, well, he was doomed from the jump. But then you get the kid, the kid from across the way who grew up in private housing, that grew up in a gated community, who, his parents make a good living or this, that, and the other. It's like, oh, so you show sympathy toward that kid because his life was just so unraveling. And it literally goes back to 100% what that person looks like. And it's so evident. It's crazy because we could talk about the difference, especially in the media, all day long. The kid who went and shot up the church in South Carolina full of Black people. Okay, they got him unscathed when he got out. He killed like 13 people with an automatic rifle, and they took him to Burger King before they took him to jail. But we have unarmed Black children getting killed in their front yards with water guns. And we have all these things that go on, and it's like, especially with the police shootings and stuff, like people are always, well, defend the badge first. That's not always been the case.
Well, let me ask you this, and I know I'm on your podcast.
No, it's okay,
Bruce. But I mean, you went through a bit. I mean, the way that you were treated for speaking out on all of this, right? For speaking out on behalf of victims of police violence, I think by Major League Baseball is probably a good. I mean, in just in the last few years, it shows where we are as a society, right? We're not this colorblind. Everybody's getting along. I mean, what made you decide to go through all of that, when you did?
Man, what sent me over the edge, I've always been a big humanitarian. I'm obviously I'm a mixed race, grew up in the South, was raised around racism through baseball, life, just in general. Me and my sister had a hard time. And what happened was I was, after Kaepernick and after the things that started uprooting in America when it comes to the protesting and this, that, and the other, I was telling Paulie the other day, Donald Trump had a rally in Huntsville, Alabama, where I'm from. And I was in Oakland at the time, like we were in season. And one of my boys had sent me the thing. He was like, you have to watch this. And I was like, all right, whatever. And so I watched it, and he called out the NFL players for peacefully protesting. He called them sons of bitches. And he pushed the narrative of, wouldn't you like to see these guys protesting our troops and our American flag fired and never allowed to work in football ever again? And the fact that he called them out of their names, had no idea who they were, but in a peaceful manner, something that is by law given to every one of us, in a peaceful manner, for him to do that and hear and see the crowd stand up and give him literally the loudest ovation. It broke my heart, honestly, because as tough as my childhood was when it comes to people, that's where I'm from. And so it broke me in half. Like, I called my dad that night, and my dad's an he's ex-Army. A lot of my family is actually ex-Army. and or current Army, excuse me. And I told him, I was like, I can't do this. And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, I cannot just sit here and make my check and shut up. I was like, I can't do it. I was like,
Yeah.
this, it's sickening. It hurts my heart. It hurts my soul. I said, because I was raised to treat everybody the same. And to
Right.
see the highest power, highest platform in our country doing something like that, and the people where I'm from applauding that, it really tore me in half. And I told my dad, I was like, you know what? I'm kneeling tomorrow. I can't do this anymore. I said, this is bigger than my paycheck. This is bigger than my job. I said, we're talking about humanity here. I was like, which is bigger than all of us. I was like, I can't do it. I was like, I can't do it. And at the time, man, I had just under a year of service time. So clearly I wasn't doing it for popularity. I was like, I wasn't doing it to be notarized. I did it to stand up for the people who couldn't speak for themselves, for the tragedies that have been happening to people of color for centuries, man. And in our game and in baseball, we pride ourselves representing all these countries and all these different races to come together to play America's pastime. But at the same time, like, we got Latin players that come into the States that get shit on by teammates or by the community because they don't speak the language. We got Black players who make up a very little that we really have to go around and keep our head down and our mouths shut about our personal beliefs because we make up such a small amount. Like, we're afraid that we're going to lose our jobs. Like, but that's the mantra of that baseball has created. And so when I did what I did, I knew what was coming, but I didn't know how dark it would get. Like, I knew people would hate me. I knew I would get the racial slurs. I knew the parameters of my actions, the consequences of my actions. I honestly didn't think it would push me to the point of suicidal thoughts. I didn't think it would bury me like it did for that short period of time. But I've told my agents, I've told people that have interviewed me, I said, I made it through. I said, I'm stronger than ever. I said, we're doing things like this to change that narrative. And if I had to do it all over again, I would. I said, because the purpose and the meaning of it was way more important than my own career, than my own paycheck. And I said, I was standing up for myself. I was standing up for my family. I was standing up for the people that look like me, that don't get fair opportunities because of what they look like. I said, and listen, I've had people say, well, oh yeah, because you're so oppressed, you've made so much money, this and the other side. I had to work 15 times harder than the dude next to me.
Right.
I was like, just to even get a chance.
Yeah.
I was like, just to even get a chance. I said, so you can't fault me for doing great at my job.
Yeah.
I was like, it doesn't change the fact. I said, we've had NFL players, NBA players, all these things get mishandled by police, and they make all this money. They on TV every day, and they're superstars. I said, I was far from a superstar. I said, so how do you explain that? I was like, how do you explain this? I was like, and I'm not talking about Ray Rice. I'm not talking about none of those dudes that put their hands on women, none of that. I'm just talking about normal people that we've seen in the media. I said, but they claim they changed that narrative. And I said, so it does happen to us. I said, it happens a little less, but it still happens. And that's why I did what I did.
So that's why we're here, like, for people to hear that, because that's similar to, like, back in the day, you know, you got Craig Hodges. I don't know if you know who that is, Bruce or John, but Craig Hodges, who played for the Bulls back in the day, you know, stood up and, you know, won an NBA championship and, you know, went to the White House, wore a dashiki, gave a handwritten letter to George W. Bush. He was the best shooter in the league. He had won, like, 2-time three-point champion. What team doesn't want a guy like that? Come the following season, no one calls him. No one calls him. So things like that are the reason why I feel like your story needs to be heard, Bruce, because had you heard that story, you know, maybe you may not have done it, maybe you would have, but at the same time, it's what empowers those people to stand up, because I think Craig said the same thing, right? He had already been standing up for things like that. And that kind of goes into like what I was gonna say next is like these leagues, music, actors, athletes. America has a double standard for profiting off of what we do to entertain them, but when it doesn't suit them and their viewpoints, it doesn't suit the system, then they throw the book at it. They instantly throw the book at it, and that's a problem here. And that's why, you know, Bruce, you empower athletes to speak up, and I want to empower athletes and artists and platformed individuals to speak up on how they feel the right way to not affect their families. And I don't want anybody to lose their livelihood, right? That's not my goal here.
Right.
But ultimately, I feel like you're losing your livelihood if you don't, right? Yeah. Because this is your life we're talking about at this point. You know what I mean? My bro almost lost his life. Yeah. Literally lost his life, and he chooses to speak up. So I just want to talk about what, you know, you guys' opinion and just thoughts on that double standard that America has for us to embrace our music, embrace our clothing, embrace our. I mean, think about man. When I walk around Chicago now, it's a phase that, you know, we used to wear these Air Force Ones. I mean, we still wear them. Air Force Ones is like a staple of Chicago, New York. Right. Y'all know them. It's everywhere now.
Right.
I mean,
got the Cap edition, dog.
You know,
out here.
You know,
out here.
When you walk around now, you can't even go to store. They're sold out almost everywhere. Mm-hmm. And these are the same shoes that, you know, my community has been wearing since we were jits. And now here they come back. Everybody's wearing them. They're floppy. They were dirty back then. You know, you can go as far as, you know, women's hair. You can go as far as, I mean, what is you guys' viewpoints on that?
Go ahead, John.
I mean, look, you know, I think, you know, Bruce's story and everything that we're talking about, it and the fact of how recent this is, just shows you that, you know, for how we want to consider ourselves as a country, we're not where we think we are, right? I think, you know, right when Biden started, President Biden, he said, you know, America is not a racist country, and people were debating that, talking back and forth. And I think that's maybe where he sits. You know, he doesn't see it as a racist country because he doesn't have the experiences that you know, Bruce has had, or that Paulie has had, or that, you know, every other person we know in certain communities have had, right? The way my clients have been targeted, harassed, surveilled, tried, you know, everybody, like, it's not the same system. And, you know, I represent, you know, white collar people too, good people. But it's a very different path, right? And because, you know, when prosecutors come into court, you know, they've gone to law school, and so they see people like themselves, and they say, oh, you know, that could have been me. Maybe if I had gone that way and messed up in this way, you know, maybe I might have embezzled a few million. But then when they look at, you know, a young Black kid who had a gun, who's in a community where people are shooting each other because you live on one side of the street and you live on the other side of the street. And so you want to live and you're being threatened. And so for no other reason, you carry a gun. Now you're going to prison, right? Mm-hmm. Because the prosecutors generally don't come from that community. They haven't seen that. They don't know the fear that exists, like how it feels to, you know, like pump gas and be, you know, I don't know, like if that's a thing where you folks are, but like, I know clients are like, you know, pumping gas is the dangerous spot because you are out and people will drive by and see you and you're from over there and he's from over there.
100%, 100%. That's a thing. It's not
even
just pumping gas. I mean, going into the gas station, going into stores, I mean,
Right.
getting out of your car. Everybody here drives with tinted windows in Chicago because you don't want to be really seen. And when somebody comes up to you in the next car, you have to look. Like, this is a normal thing that we got to go through every day that some people don't even understand.
Dude, I've walked in the gas stations where I'm from as a grown man. Like I'm talking as recent as like 2 years ago. And I've stopped and got gas at, not a main Shell or anything like that, but just like a little gas station because I live out in the country. I'm from the country, out in Alabama, and I said, and I've had on multiple occasions when I'm by myself, an older white man walk in the store after me. He eyed me the whole time, and a few of those encounters, he'd be like, "Boy, you lost."
Yeah.
And I'm talking like 10 minutes from where I'm from, like my house. And I've brought friends of mine, like where I'm from. Like I brought a couple years back, man, I brought one of my Hispanic boys, like from out here actually in Arizona. He came to hit with me for a few days, and he walked in the gas. I was outside pumping gas, putting it in my truck. He goes in the gas station. He comes like speed walking right back out, not 5 minutes later. And I'm like, "Yo, you all right? What's the matter?" He was like, "Bro, I just had two white dudes asking me A, if I was a chink," which I don't even know how that even relates to him. I said, "But B," I said, "they asked me if I was lost because I shouldn't be here." He goes, "And I was going in to get some chips."
Oh man.
He was like, "This is where you're from." I was like, "Bro," I said, I've had different encounters like that, just like we said, like depending on where you at, you experience things differently. And I was like, I've had experiences like that. And it's just crazy to me. And like we were just talking about the double standard. And I tell people, like, everything's good if it's benefiting that type part of the industry. Like you gotta understand in the last, I don't know how many years, let me say 20. I just looked up a stat that majority of rap music is purchased, rap music, hardcore rap music,
Yep.
whatever it is, majority of music is purchased by whites. I was like,
Absolutely.
yeah, so it's mainstreamed by quote unquote the majority, which is not even created by them. So
Mm.
not only do they buy it the most, they then push it the most. And as soon as something goes wrong, they're just like, bang, we're squashing it. I mean, it's just a whole double, it's crazy. And it's just like athletes, like baseball.
Like you, Bruce. It's like
Yeah.
you.
Well,
Right.
what's
You,
just,
you,
Right.
you
yeah.
kneeled before everybody was kneeling, and now they do it every year.
Yeah.
Like
No.
at
And that's what,
the first game.
And that's what I'm saying. Like when you're in the NBA, I guarantee you, it's very hard for them, their front offices, to disagree with the players and not back them because they hold the majority in the league.
Yeah, no, what I was going to say is, it's a similar way of society policing blackness or people of color. Whether it's in the criminal justice system, it's the same thing as I think what you experience, Bruce, which is you're permitted to exist within society as long as you follow certain rules, don't step out of line, do the music you're supposed to do the athletics you're supposed to do, but you got to stay within these narrow confines that everybody else doesn't have to stay within,
It's
right?
modern day slavery.
And if you step outside, you will be punished. And I think Bruce, I mean, you had death threats, right?
Oh man, dude, I had thousands of them things like for years. I still had people, man, I got removed. I left. I'm gonna say I left for just for a point here, but I went down to Mexico in 2019 to play in that summer. So we're talking 2 years removed from kneeling, and had a whole new social media set up, everything. Still had people I'm in a whole nother country, not speaking on nothing. I'm out there trying to make some money and live my life. And I still had people that found me saying like, "Hey, you might be in Mexico, but I hope you fucking die. Like, I hope you get shot up by the cartel. I hope your house still catches on fire. You're still the N-word." Like all these things, like people go out of their way still to this day to find me. Like, it just to say that. And I'm just like, it's still, it's such a crazy thing, because going through it and whatnot, it's just amazing how our country and our government and whatever, our police force, they can label all this bad shit that happens to rappers, to athletes. They can go out of their way to relate them to crimes and all this unjust activity, for lack of a better word. I said, but they're also the main people that are pushing rap music the way it is. They're not changing it. They're pushing it to get profit. But now all of a sudden somebody gets assumed
Alleged.
I'm saying they get consumed by it, and then they start acting like it, and now that person is the problem and rap music is the problem. But statistically, the purchasing and the pushing and the ownership of these labels are predominantly non-African American people.
True.
So it's just crazy, like we talked about, that double standard is so crazy, because most of our culture, rap music, dressing, dances, whatever, are pushed and promoted by white people. But as soon as it becomes a problem, they're like, nope, we're not associated with it. Nope, not even close. So it's just wild, and that's why we're bringing this up with you, because you see it on a different label. But it's so crazy to me how you can sit here and push it and support it and promote it, and then as soon as somebody gets in some trouble, you're like, he's just another victim to black society or black on black crime or whatever it is. But like, it's literally like you said, you can exist and you can play, and we'll pay you as long as you say this, do this, wear this, and nothing else. It's crazy.
No, it's normal. It's normalized. John, I wanted to kind of dive into you a little bit on your personal experience. And this is like kind of like, I don't know if anybody's asked you this before. And then after that, I want to get into more solution based, like how we can plug in. But, personally, like you defending high profile hip hop artists or athletes, or not even high profile people of color. Have you ever been questioned, commented, snickered at about why are you doing this for them? Like, why are you pushing for them? Like, that has to be an experience. I'm curious if you've ran into that, like off, what I mean? Obviously off the record, they're going to do that, but like they catch you in the courtroom hallway. They catch you like at a, pre-trial meeting or something. I don't know, but like, talk about that experience for me just a little bit, if you may.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting experience being a criminal defense attorney, because you're an attorney, so you're supposed to have some sort of status in society, right? You're an attorney, you went to law school. My view is that I don't think of myself as, having gone to law school and being an attorney makes me better than anybody. It just taught me some things about how to practice law. But, even within lawyers, you go to social events and people are like, how do you, what do you do if your client is guilty? I'm like, which is funny to me, because it's like, yes, plenty of innocent people get caught up in the criminal justice system, but a lot of people that end up in the criminal justice system, they're around things there, and it may not be what the prosecutor thinks they did, but they may be associated with somebody. But to me, when you spend time with people in a cell that are fighting for their life, facing life in prison, you kind of understand that you're fighting for all of us, right? Because when you see the history that people have had that got them to that place, you think, or at least I think, I'm like, wow, I think I've been through some things, but I don't have bullet holes in my body. I don't have the scars and the abuse and the trauma that, most people that are in on some tougher crimes have been through a lot, right? And so, to me, I feel privileged. I feel honored. I feel like, I get to fight for somebody's life, right? And so that's, I don't, it doesn't bother me to get judged if people say, "Oh, how can you defend those people?"
Well, what about the colleagues that make it a race thing? I mean, I'm talking about the ones that are like, you're defending that blank, you're defending that blank, or you know what I mean? Like, do you come across that? And have you ever? And how does that make you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think where that comes out the most is dealing with some prosecutors that come from privileged backgrounds, come from all white or predominantly white suburbs or places where they haven't grown up in communities where they've mixed with people that have gone through hard times, right? And so that, to me, that really bothers me when you're sitting up here and you've had all of this you've had a great life. And instead of being grateful for the great life that you've been given, you turn around and you judge this person over here who hasn't been given any of that. In fact, has gotten the exact opposite of that. And so, sometimes I do, it is hard to listen to people like that talk about your client, the person you represent, who you know personally, who you know their family. And they just see them as, another young Black man with a gun, right? And instead of, well, this is, and you try to explain, hey, look, man, somebody shot up his house last week because his brother had a fight with somebody else. And they're like, well, he shouldn't have had a gun. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, I guess, ideally, no, but you didn't have good bullets coming through your house, right? And so how are you going to turn around and say what he or she shouldn't have done?
Preach, John, preach.
Yeah, don't get me going. But yeah, it is hard because it's, people, we all have all these different types of lives and experiences. And when you haven't been through it and just it's real. Something that Bruce said earlier, which is like, we put all of this money, time, and effort into the criminal justice system to prosecute and punish people, but nobody wants to do anything on the front end. It's all on the back end after the accidents that have happened, right?
It's reactionary.
Yeah, instead of saying, hey, why don't we make sure kids are fed, have school lunches, have education, have, social service, aren't home, they have, kids are homeless, kids are living on the streets.
Especially
there's so much bad stuff that kids go through. And then you wonder why something bad happens later on. Well, we don't put any of the money into fixing these things. We put all our money into police and prisons and, the back end. And that, to me, that's probably the most frustrating part of it is that, I wish the politicians would step up on the front end. So, hey, put me out of work, right? I'd be happy not to have to defend people, but, until that changes, I'm going to be in it.
No, for sure, man. And that's it's crazy because, what you said is something that I preach on. It's like, it's amazing how people can direct their sympathy and empathy and change it depending on who it is, and it's that, and like you said, it's like that judging of what that person looks like or where they live or whatever it is. They were like, okay, well, I'm not giving sympathy to that person, even though they've probably been through hell and back and they're 15 years old or they're 18 years old or whatever. But I'm going to give sympathy to, that person because he looks like me. And he comes from wealthy parents and he comes from the suburbs and he went to a good school. All these things. And that's the biggest thing. Like, and it kind of, all this kind of rolls into our talk about, how do we make steps into solutions. And for me, in my situation, and I still go through it, one thing that really bothered me after taking a knee was that people would like go out of their way, teammates, whatever. And when anything racial happened on TV, I might not even have seen it. They, instead of talking with their fellow teammates that look like them about, the reality and treating people with respect, this, that, and the other, they would be like, "Hey, Bruce, did you see what happened on TV yesterday? What's your thoughts?" I'm like, "Why are you coming to me? Because I'm the only black dude on the team?" Like, I was like, why don't you ask your teammate right over there that was watching the news with you what he thought? Like, and because I preach this to the kids I work with. I preach this to, obviously the stuff that me and Polly do as well. It's about having the conversation, and that's the whole point about this, because at the end of the day, humanity is the most important thing on the planet. And it's like, I feel like one of our biggest solutions is understanding the fact that we create these labels amongst people. We create them. Poor, rich, educated, not educated, all these things. And a lot of it is a result of your environment. Like, I mean, how many people that grow up to be doctors or surgeons or lawyers or whatever because they were like, well, I didn't really have a choice. My parents were doctors and lawyers. I was like, it's the same thing as if you're growing up in an underprivileged area and you have maybe parents that pop in and out. They might be struggling with addictions or finding a job or whatever it is. You're bouncing between this house and your grandma's house or whatever. I was like, so why does one person get looked at differently? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, for me, I try to teach humanity. I try to teach some of these young men how to be good human beings. I was like, regardless of where you're from, where they're from, what they look like, how you dress, how they dress, whatever it is. And these conversations I feel like are going to help in some capacity, because like at the end of the day, we just see people for what the media tells you about them. And the media is so much, I hate to say this, but it's so much bullshit on a regular basis. It really is, that they don't show you the two sides of the story. Because at the end of the day, that negative, especially when it comes to people of color, that negative, dangerous topic or viewpoint gets the most views, it gets the most clicks, it's the most controversial. Therefore, it's beneficial, like we talked about, it's beneficial to that media outlet or whoever runs it, because that's where they get their exposure. They don't want to go out of the way and be like, hey, this dude has 3 kids, he's got 4 jobs, he's trying to get his family out, he's trying to get out of debt. This just happened last week. Like you said, the kid got his house shot up last week. He's trying to manage through that. He got drug into something because, of his brother or whatever. There's no sympathy in that part. But God forbid somebody makes a bad business decision and evades their taxes, and they're just like, throw it away because it's a rich white person, or it's a person who has this company or whatever it is. And it's like, we have to try to eliminate that stigma that every person of color is dangerous. Every person of color is uneducated. Every person of color is an angry person of color. I've been called an angry black man plenty of times. I'm not even angry. I'm just fed up with shit. And me and Polly talked about this on the last time. If black people and people of color wanted revenge, it would be hell on earth. Period. Hell on earth. And nobody wants that, because at the end of the day, as a people, we just want to be treated equally. Like, we want the same opportunities as the person next to us. When we went through the same school, had better grades, all these things, worked 10 times harder. We want the same equal opportunity, not that premeditated judgment, for lack of a better word, because our skin's a little darker, or we're from LA and that person, is from wherever. Like, it's just crazy to me.
Right. I think, what I think a good point that you just raised, and is also one of my big frustrations, is, the way that media now, I mean, and I guess probably forever, but it's it thrives on controversy, right? Like I saw in the news the other day that all the media's ratings have been down since Trump left office, because when he was in office, there was controversy nonstop, right? And so when there's not a controversy that exists, they're going to create one, right?
Mhm.
And they're gonna fire up one side and get them angry at the other side. And then a lot of this ends up happening around race, right? And that's what you were talking about before, or we were talking about before, which is, the way that the media can try to turn us against one another, right? By portraying young Black men as angry and dangerous, and then pumping up, like, we've seen in in San Francisco, in LA, in New York, there's been movements to reform the police, to reform the criminal justice system, but the media is on the other side. Not all of them. I mean, there's some, there's a lot of good journalists. There's the media companies, however, they know that to sell, they need clicks. And so they want the most controversial topic they can cover. And so they've been pumping up crime here in San Francisco, even though crime rates have been falling. Crime rates have been some of the lowest in history, although there's been some violent crime recently. But that creates controversy, and that creates people watching, right? And so, to the degree that is turning us against each other, and that's their business model, we all end up getting caught in the middle. And that's why communities get hurt. That's why the criminal justice system is like it is. That's why policing is like it is. That's why the baseball, the sports, entertainment is like it is, because it's that controversy. And not all of it is self-generated. Some of it's generated by the media, I think.
Hey, I'll tell you this though, before we come out with our closing remarks or whatever. I'll tell you, when they, in the game of baseball, I had a few people hit me up when they announced this year that they were adding the Negro League stats, to the MLB mantra, whatever. And they were like, "Aren't you excited?" I was like, "What's there to be excited about?" And they were like, "What do you mean? Like, they're including them?" And I was like, "Bro," I said, "the MLB is the reason why the Negro Leagues was created in the first place." I was like, right. I said, people get this idea that's misconstrued about, oh, they played over here and then they did really well and then they came here. No, they tried to play with the majority, and they weren't allowing them because of their skin. I said because of the color that person was, they kicked them out. They never even allowed them to walk in the door. Therefore, the Negro Leagues was created. I said it wasn't because, I said that it's not like the MLB created it. No, it was a reaction to the racism that stemmed in the game of baseball. I said, so when people come to me talking about that, I said, you got to understand something. I was like, regardless if you want to or not. I was like, people always say baseball is America's pastime. I said, yeah, so is racism. I was like, you can't have one without the other. I said, because the Negro Leagues wouldn't even have existed if racism wasn't present.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so it's like the perception, the systematic agenda, for lack of a better word, is, pushing these narratives to keep people battling each other instead of standing up together and battling the system. Because if you, and I bet you know this, what I'm about to say. Exactly. I'm about to say this. End of the day, people come together and stand up for what's right amongst human beings, amongst our U.S. citizens, whatever. I was like, people are going to label that as standing against your country, even though not understanding the fact that the creed of our country was created on these exact things that are happening right now. Racism, murder, thievery, you name it. This is how the America came to be founded. I was like, you can't find a country that's already been found. Like, and so it's like, nobody wants to dig that deep. Nobody wants to see it really, because they're good in their own little world. So they're just going to worry about themselves. It's crazy. It goes so deep. It's retarded, bro. It's retarded.
it's easy for people to write that off as in that was back then. But
Yeah, exactly.
my last stuff will be, one, as far as solution is the disparities. As I was talking to you, I'm looking at the shirt that I'm wearing, and I can think about Eric Gardner, and I can think about George Floyd, and I can think about how it started with them. One was a alleged counterfeit $20 bill. Let's say George Floyd didn't have money, and he did have a counterfeit $20 bill because he didn't really have a real one.
It's $20
because that's a disparity.
Not a death sentence, right? Yeah,
it's a disparity, right? Then you got Eric Gardner, who was selling loose cigarettes, right? That's a disparity because he's trying to hustle. He shouldn't be having to sell loose cigarettes out there because of him being pushed back in this system. So the disparities are a large part of the system, how the system was set up as well. And then on top of that, like you said, I want to make my Air Force One analogy make sense. Is that it's kind of like the Negro Leagues. Like at first, when you wore Air Force Ones out, you weren't allowed to get in anywhere. They used Air Force Ones as a way to say, "Nah, fam, you can't get in here."
Same thing with J's.
Same with Jordans, because you got those on, and we know what you're on, basically. But they'll label you.
Right.
And I've had experiences where some of my friends. I've had the pleasure of being very social and also having opportunity to dive into different places. And I would bring my friends along so that they can experience those. I've been that type of connector. And, I've had some of my friends and my homies tell me, bro, we can't go there. I got on J's right now. We can't go there. I got on this. And it's like, and I'm like, nah, bro, I was with my homies. You can go get in. And I had to stop and think like, right, bro. Like I may have got in with them, you know what I mean, with these on, but when I'm with you, we're not getting in. You know what I mean? So, and that happened at an early age. So, that's a major thing about when it works for them, it works for them. And then now everybody's wearing the Air Force Ones, and guess what? Everybody's getting in everywhere. And you'll still see instances where one group will be wearing them. But just as long as they're not in line at the same time and you can't get called out about it, you know what I mean? Then, hey, if this person comes at 7 and this person comes at 9, and I see two different instances, these people not getting in and these people getting in with the same thing on. So it's just when it's convenient for them. But solution-based with Edify, it's also funny to see now, a year later after my brother has gotten shot, how many media outlets wanted to do stories. I had over 100 media outlets in my Twitter and Facebook and Instagram messages wanting to do stories on the shooting and status and this. But a lot of these reporters are still following me to this day. And I know they see what we're doing with Edify. And I know they see how we're plugging to communities. And I know they see how we're having these conversations. Ask me how many people have reached out to do a spread on that. So, it goes to show that we have to also create a type of dual power so that we can fuel our own narratives always. And that's a big part of why me and Bruce are pushing these conversations with important people like John Hamasaki out here representing people that don't have the voices and don't have the system on their side. So, man, we appreciate you. I'm gonna let Bruce close us off.
John, give us, seeing how we're wrapping things up, if you had one thing to say right now to our community, to the people watching this over our whole discussion, what you got? What you got? Close it out.
That's a lot of pressure to put on closing it out. But I think having these conversations with a variety of people, maybe people that you wouldn't normally talk to every day, and getting different perspectives, I think it's really valuable, right? I think, learning more about your story, Bruce, I think has been really eye-opening for me. Like I had heard about it, but I didn't, dig into it until we were going to talk. And, to understand everything that you've gone through and how recent it was within baseball, one of our biggest sports in the country, is really eye-opening. And, I think for a lot of us, I mean, I've been doing what I've been doing for my career because I think it's the right thing. But I think there's, I do try to have more of an open mind than maybe I did when I was starting out, and I would see racism and I would hate racists and I would hate, a lot of that you comes to you naturally from having experiences. I think, at the end of the day, I believe that people are generally good, that, sitting down, talking face to face, even though we may battle it out on social media and in the media, I think that, the work that you folks are doing is important in that we're trying to bridge communities and open people's minds and see different sides of the world than you would normally see in life. That to me is a hopeful thing, because, until we see each other face to face, and see each other as people, then we're going to keep having this division. We're going to keep, people will continue to be treated like you were, Bruce. And, the police violence, that Paulie, that you've seen, all of these things, I think it's not going to be a short-term solution or a quick fix, but what I would say is having these conversations is crucial to getting towards a better future.
Well, man, again, it's been an absolute pleasure rapping with you on here today. We appreciate you coming on our podcast. Paulie Jackson, I'm Bruce Maxwell. Thank you guys for joining us for another episode of The Backstop, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Thanks again, John. Call it back.
Thank you. Thank you.